Aloha, namaste. This is Radha, and I'm here to talk about our full moon, Guru Purnima, which is happening really tonight, Saturday, the 20th, because it's at 12:16 a.m., the 21st here in Hawaii. And Pacific time, it's going to be 3:16 a.m. So really early in the morning on the 21st for those of us in these further time zones. Guru Purnima is said to be the most auspicious full moon of the year. The word guru brings up a lot for many people. The idea of there being a teacher that can help us dispel our darkness and bring us into the light of wisdom is one that is both compelling and also for many people sort of terrifying. We, you know, we've heard so many stories of people who take advantage of this position and this role, and to be truly a guru and a chela, the student of the guru, one needs to completely surrender their own ego, right? They need to be able to just completely allow the teachings to unfold, and this other person has an extreme amount of power in that way. And so we can see that this can become a sticky subject for many of us. And we have very few true teachers in our time, right? We're in Kali Yuga and people are ridden with so many challenges to be in their highest light. So we don't have a lot of examples of people who really can hold that space. And so we often go the other way and say, well, we don't need teachers. I'm going to be my own teacher. The idea of having a teacher or somebody who passes wisdom to us is a really important part of the Vedic tradition because it shows us our own humility. It's similar to prayer in that way, where the capacity to bow down before something and say that your ego is not running the show, that your ego is not the thing that determines everything that's happening, is very fundamental to being able to understand and integrate the teachings that we're learning. If you think that you can just make your own way and everything's based on what you want and how you want to make it, well, that's going to probably run you into problems at some point because your ego is powerful and has a lot of different places it will run you into, a mirage or Maya of some sort, some kind of illusion that makes you think you're going a certain way and you're not. And the nature of a true teacher is that they will put you in positions that feel very uncomfortable and where you have to face parts of yourself you don't really want to face. And it can feel like they're torturing you or, harming you in some way. And that surrender, that part where you've put your full trust and faith in them, is essential if you're going to be able to overcome those challenges and see the light at the end of the tunnel and be able to fully understand and realize what's being taught to you. And so this is the nature of that. And in our time today, we have a lot of our information and wisdom and knowledge that's come from written texts, right? The idea that knowledge was passed from a guru to a chela in that traditional way is something that has had some interruption, right? Like I said, first of all, there's just the nature of the teachers themselves and how high they really are and whether or not they're abusing their power. But there's also just this long timeline where things have been broken and different sects have broken off and so much has changed. And we're relying heavily on written material. And this is a reason why the sage Vyasa is who is honored the most on Guru Purnima, because he's the one who wrote the Mahabharata, which has the Bhagavad Gita in it. He's the one who wrote the Puranic texts. So many of the stories and the myths that I love to share come from the Puranic texts. He edited the Vedas. He took them and made them into, he took the Vedic hymns and made them into these volumes, these 4 volumes. And he's said to be the child of Parashara himself, who is the godfather of Vedic astrology, Jyotish. So this honoring of this person who helped bring these texts, this wisdom that was being practiced in a very alive manner into a written form, into volumes that we can carry into our now knowing, is fundamental. But at the same time, the writing of it down, the putting it in a book, the making it that causes problems within itself. The fact that it's not just this oral tradition being passed from a true teacher to a true student. And so we have to include all of this in what we do. We can't just ignore the holes in our history, right? We have to acknowledge them at some point. And this particular Guru Purnima is really powerful because usually we'll see that the moon will be in Sagittarius for Guru Purnima, more often than not. It's in this Hindu month of Ashad, which is July and August. And more often than not, the moon will still be in Sagittarius. But this particular Guru Purnima, we have our moon in Capricorn. And I'm going to share my screen and show you our alignments we're reckoning with right now, because it does bring a much more somber nature to this Guru Purnima than we often have. There's usually this really uplifting and inspired nature of Sagittarius, where we feel the hopefulness, we feel inspired, and we also feel very on fire, right? It's a fire sign, and we have this quality of being like, the sky's the limits if we just believe these things and we can just understand these high teachings. And in Capricorn, we're being called to integrate our beliefs and our inspirations into practical reality. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, who's retrograde, right? We have this need to really reflect upon the suffering that we personally bring into our own world and sphere, and that collectively we bring into our world and sphere. We have an obsession with suffering, whether we recognize it or not. As much as we seem to be obsessed with, the high life and the comforts and the material well-being, we also have an obsession with things being difficult, hard, a strife, a war. And we look upon these texts that I speak of, particularly the Mahabharata, it is an epic tale of war. And it is one where Krishna calls upon Arjuna to be the warrior that he is, that he's born to be this warrior, and that is his path, and he doesn't get to choose otherwise. And for many people in our world, that is their path. The path is one of facing adversity and overcoming it. But for many of the rest of us, that might not necessarily be our path, but it seems to be the inherited reality we tend to create again and again, how hard things can be and how we can make them more and more difficult. Even the ways we make our life easier with technology and things like this tend to create more obstacles and challenges than we need. Everything has many more steps than it needs to have. Saturn calls us into simplicity. It strips away so many of the things that we are attached to, so many of the things we think we need. And in Capricorn, that's even calling upon our attachment to our own body, our own life, our own reality. We see the moon here in these very early degrees of Capricorn in Uttarashada, which is a star that moves from Sagittarius to Capricorn. So the moon's been moving. We've had the moon in this hopeful Sagittarius place, and it's moved into, even as I'm making this video, it's in the Sagittarian place and moving into Capricorn on the star of the Vishwadevas. The Vishwadevas are every deity. They're the all deities. They're the power of all the different forces of nature and of our highest selves coming together to support us. Uttarashada is the invincible star. It's the later victory. It's the place where we are like the elephant tusk that is the symbol of this star, where we are just so big and so powerful that we can plow through anything and survive. And we don't actually have to be very aggressive or intense about it. Just the massive size of the elephant allows it to be, immune to things like lions, and other predatory features and qualities, not the human who's been chasing the tusk and murdering them for their tusks, but the nature of the elephant in the natural world is one of power that isn't aggressive or predatory. It's just power that's innate and held. And when we harness this kind of energy and this kind of power, we see that everything doesn't have to be quite as complicated as we make it. If we're down on the ground inspecting every single little detail, it looks like a lot, right? If we were the size of a tiny little bug or even the mouse that Ganesh, the elephant, rides, we would see all the little things that are in front of us, all the big obstacles. But even no matter what size we are, no matter where we are on our path, everything that's in front of us can be taken one step at a time. And this is what the retrograde Saturn is really showing us right now, this slowness. I don't know about you, but I could even see it with my animals, with my neighbors' animals. Usually these dogs are barking all over the place. Everybody was very somber yesterday. There's this quality of quiet. And some of that had to do with Mercury's jump over the Gandanta, which if you want to know more about, you can see my Mercury and Leo video. But this need to quiet ourselves is a big Saturn lesson. Our need to get to the thing right in front of us. Like, this is the step in front of us I'm taking. And if we're counting all the other steps we need to take, it can be immense. It can be complicated. It can be vast. But if we just look at the one in front of us and we deal with that one, and then we move to the next one, things start to simplify. And we also might start to recognize how many of the other steps are extra, or how much maybe of where we're going, where we think we're going, isn't worth it. You know, if there are too many steps to get there, why are we even getting to this particular place? One of the things that's interesting with this moon is that even though it's not in Sagittarius, and Guru is the name for Jupiter, who rules Sagittarius, and he is right now, Jupiter joined Mars in Taurus. And we have a one-way drishti from Jupiter. So Mars is not giving this drishti because Mars gives a 7th house, an 8th house, and a 4th house drishti, but Jupiter is giving his one-way 9th house drishti to Capricorn, to our moon here. And we'll feel it more actually after the full moon because the degrees are a little bit later. But that hopefulness and that inspiration that Jupiter is giving us in this situation is in another earth sign. And it's in the sign of material pleasure. It's in the sign of abundance, wealth, and health, our body, our form. And so the inspiration then comes to be, you know, more abundant and more healthy and feel more pleasure and feel more ease and grace, and not necessarily the high wisdom that we often would reflect upon, where Sagittarius is giving us teachings and specific, you know, dictation of how to become a higher being in the world. The nature of what a guru might be teaching a chela is shifted in this particular set of alignments. We have Venus across the way, the ruler of Taurus, in Cancer, where we're, you know, relating to people in a very nurturing way, and perhaps not feeling our own needs fully met if we're not taking care of that give and take that Venus is responsible for. So we have also that reflection of our relationships and our neediness, perhaps, in our relationships, our need for one another that is being reflected upon. And here we have our moon. The full moon is always reflecting the opposite of where the sun is. It's always the opposite of where either the next new moon cycle is or the previous new moon cycle is. And so it's showing us, well, sure, we need people and we need one another and we have a need for unconditional love. But in the end, when we lose our body and we lose everything here on earth, we're going to lose all those relationships, and we're going to even lose our relationship we have with ourselves, our ego's attachment to this body, this identity, this person that we are, and all this wisdom we've accrued and all these things we think we know is all going to be kind of nothing. And that's why Saturn, in the schematic of the planets, comes after Jupiter, after even Venus, with this call to release everything. You know, do we have the high teachings with Jupiter? Yes. Can we bring them to Earth into our actual relationships with other people with Venus? Hopefully. Can we surrender everything beyond just surrendering our will to a teacher where we have a hope of getting something from them? Because in the highest Guru Chela relationship, we're not trying to get our specific thing that we wanted met, right? We are actually open to receive what we need to receive. I had a client yesterday ask me about a guru, and how do you get one? You know, and the answer is you don't. You know, the guru gets you. They choose you, and you have to be ready and open and willing and in that place. Very similar to, you know, being in a real relationship. There's a part where you have to be in the place in order for that other person to meet you. Otherwise, everything's going to be in this egoic realm where we're forcing things. And that's when all this tainted history of the guru comes about, when people are trying to get specific things and other people are manipulating that situation. When we're in our ego, there's always so much room for failure, and the failures will be rising to the surface. We will see the ways in which we've made the wrong commitments, the wrong choices. We've been humbled by these choices. That's the blessing of Saturn, is that we get to see where we've been in our failing nature, where we failed. And it humbles us, and it allows us to get down further on our knees, bow further down before the fact that we aren't in control of this ship. At the same time as we're not in control of the ship, we have this capacity to make choice, right? We have volition. We can make the easier choice, or we can see the simplicity. We can distill things down to the most simple form, or what's directly in front of us. We don't have to get caught up in all the noise. This is a really powerful remembrance right now, particularly in the climate we're in the, you know, in the United States, and I'm sure in other places as well. I just took a visit to the mainland of the United States, and people are very caught up in the news and what's happening and the sort of dramas that are constantly being created. This is how you can see our obsession with things being difficult, because the news thrives off of negative information, right? That's how they sell their news, is that it's big, it's bad, it's scary, it's this, and everybody can rally around this collective fear together. And that's what we've been doing. And so this is a really powerful time to step into not rallying around your fear, you know, not joining the frenzy and the fray, but rather really seeing the ways in which you can, in your own personal world, because that's all you have any power or say over. You can't change all the other people, even the people closest to you. But in your own personal world, like, how can I simplify? How can I be a vessel of receptivity to wisdom? When there's so much clutter, it's going to be quite hard, right? When we're keeping things in a place of simplicity, then we're an open vessel able to receive. I remember when I was in Rishikesh, visiting at the Beatles ashram, the one that the Beatles made famous. There's these dome-like rooms at the very entrance. And when I went into it, I kind of had this experience of like, whoa, okay, there's no corners, you know, there's no corners here. What do we use corners for? We use them to put things in, right? We put all of our stuff in these square spaces, and we're able to kind of stack them up or put drawers and closets and all these things. When the space is kind of round, and, you know, I'm sure many a yurt owner has still figured out ways to stack a ton of things around it. But in these spaces, it was this kind of clean, clear space, and you're just sitting there. It's like everything's around you at all times. There's nothing kind of hidden. It's all in the space with you, all present in that moment. And we need to bring everything up, even the things that we don't necessarily want to, because they've been hiding in corners for a long time. But there's no way to assimilate or allow that stuff to transmute if it's not out in the open. And so these things will come whether we want them to or not. And this is a really powerful moment for us to look at what inspires us in the material plane as well, because of that Jupiter and Taurus and that reflection upon this moon. What are we being driven by? What are we being inspired by? Even if we believe we're on a spiritual path, often it's specific cities, powers we want to get, enlightenment, the desire to attain enlightenment. The stories, the Puranic texts are rife with stories of demons who've come by way of accruing a city, by way of following some kind of austerity, and allowing themselves to become so enraptured with the idea of power that they forget to stay in their heart. And this is the reflection, of course, from across the way with Cancer and where our sun is, allowing our power to come from our heart, our unconditional love, having our desire to be in this right relationship with all things where we're nurturing and receiving nurturance, even with ourselves. Are we difficult on ourselves? Are we soft on ourselves? How do we relate to our own being? Because that's a really good reflection of how we relate to everything else. So one last part I'll call upon is our Adi guru, Shiva, who is the original teacher, the original one to bring the wisdom to light. And it's said that on this day he chose to take on the 7 rishis, the sages, and allow them to be his students. Right? He found them. He said, okay, you've done all the penance, you've done all the things, and now I'm going to impart this wisdom upon you. And the nature of Shiva himself is one of destruction, right? It's one of breaking down and allowing things to be recycled back into the energy flow that never changes, right? It changes. It doesn't ever diminish or gain. And so the need for us to tune into this highest guru energy rather than more things we need to take on, more teachings, more things we need to know, perhaps the answer is actually less. What do we need to destroy? What do we need to release? What do we need to diminish and allow ourselves to just let truth rise in that space? So I wish you many blessings on this Guru Purnima. Again, if you want to know more about the other transits like Mars and Taurus and Mercury and Leo for the rest of the summer, you can see those videos. And if you want to know what this Guru Purnima is really calling upon for you yourself, as well as those other transits I talked about, I do a breakdown in my Cosmically Aligned Patreon group, where I show for each of the different rising signs, what is this moon highlighting for you? What is Capricorn in your chart? What is the moon in your chart? What is Jupiter? What is Saturn? What are all these different planets mean for you? Because they rule different areas of our life. And that means different areas of our life are being highlighted. So if you'd like to look at that, it's at patreon.com, Radha Home Astrology. You can also go to my website and get linked to there, as well as all my readings and offerings, radhahomeastrology.com. Namaste.